On this episode of Getting Rooted podcast, a lot of people think change has to be dramatic. Like it has to be a big decision, a major shift, something that completely turns your life upside down. But most of the time, that's not what you actually need. Because real change, the kind that actually lasts, doesn't usually come from blowing everything up. It comes from smaller shifts that you can actually sustain.
Let's get rooted with Getting Rooted. Rooted Podcast.
Hello, and welcome to Getting Rooted. I'm your host, Janine Hansel-Frimpong, therapist and mental wellness coach. And I help women who feel overwhelmed reset their lives without burning everything down by staying rooted internally and making small, sustainable changes. If you've been here before, you probably noticed it's been a few weeks since the last episode. And I didn't disappear. I stepped away. My dad passed away last month after a long battle with Parkinson's disease. Um, he left us. And when that happened, everything else had to wait, this space included. And I'm not sharing this for sympathy. I'm sharing it because it's part of what's shaping this episode. Because even in the middle of losing him, I felt the pull to do something drastic, like pause everything indefinitely, overhaul my whole schedule, and disappear for longer. And I want to talk about why I didn't do that and what I did instead. When something feels off in your life, your mind naturally looks for a big solution. Like, if I just change this one thing, if I just start over, if I just remove this, because it feels like the fastest way to get relief. And I want to slow down here for a second because I think it's worth actually asking. Why do we reach for the big fix in the first place? Well, part of it is nervous system. When something feels unstable, when your body wants certainty fast, it's it's a drastic move. It gives you the illusion of certainty. And quitting feels pretty certain, right? Leaving feels certain. Cutting someone off feels certain. Even if it creates new problems, it feels like you're doing something instead of sitting in the discomfort of not knowing. Part part of it is control. When life has already taken something out of your hands, whether it's a diagnosis, a loss, a relationship ending, the drastic move can feel like the one place you still get to decide something, even if the decision isn't actually the right one for you. Um, and so a part of it, honestly, is urgency. We live like relief has to happen right now. Like sitting with discomfort for a season is somewhat or somehow a failure. So we skip past the slow work and go straight to the dramatic exit. Um, and none of that makes you weak. It makes you human because it's worth knowing that about yourself. Because once you can name why you're reaching for the big fix, you can actually choose something different. But here's the problem. Drastic change often creates instability because you remove one thing, but now you've created 5 new things to manage: new stress, new pressure, new uncertainty. All right, so let's make this real for a second because I don't want this just to stay theoretical. Say you're burned out at work and your solution is quit. No plan, no transition, just walk away. And for about a week, that might feel like relief. But then the bills don't pause, right? And the job search has to start. And the uncertainty sets in. Now, you're not dealing with burnout anymore. You're dealing with burnout and financial stress and the pressure of finding something new fast. You didn't solve the problem. You traded it for three. So, another example is say it's a relationship. Things have felt off for months. And instead of naming what's actually wrong, you start imagining the exit, a clean break, a no conversation, no mess, just gone. You just ghosted people. But a relationship ending abruptly doesn't erase what was unresolved in it. And it just moves the same unresolved patterns into your next relationship because you never actually looked at them. Another example could be, say, it's your whole routine. You feel unproductive, so you decide to overhaul everything at once. New schedule, new diet, new sleep routine, new morning ritual, all starting Monday. Well, by Wednesday, you've abandoned all of it because it's not because you're inconsistent, because no system built on total upheaval was ever going to hold. But three different areas of life, same pattern every time. And the big fix feels like progress in the moment. And then it collapsed under its own weight. And I've had moments where I felt like that too, where something felt off. And my first thought was, maybe I just need to change everything, start fresh, do something completely different. Losing my dad this past month is probably the heaviest thing I've navigated in a long time. And in the middle of it, while I was still being a daughter, grieving her father, a mother, a therapist, a coach, while everything else in my life kept needing me to, the same instinct showed up again. The urge to shut it all down, clear my whole calendar, step back even further than I already had. And if I'm honest, there were a few specific fantasies as well. Closing the podcast for the rest of the year, pausing my coaching practice indefinitely, going quiet with almost everyone, not just for a season, but for good, because talking to people felt like too much. None of those were bad thoughts to have because grief does that. It makes the drastic option feels like the only honest one. But what I've been learning, even in grief, is that it doesn't ask you to burn your whole life down. Sometimes it just asks for small, honest pivots, showing up differently and not showing up less. Okay. So instead of closing the podcast, I paused it for a few weeks and I came back when I actually had something true to say, which is what you're listening to right now. Instead of pausing my whole practice, I adjusted my caseload for a month and leaned on the people who could cover for me. Instead of going quiet with everyone, I got specific about who I actually had capacity for and let the rest wait without any guilt. What I realized over time was that I didn't need a complete reset of my life. I needed to adjust how I was moving within it. And I see this pattern constantly in the women that I work with too. I think of one client, and I'll change some details here to protect her privacy. But she came to me convinced the answer to her marriage feeling distant was to move across the country. New city, new start, fresh chapter. And when we actually slowed down and looked at it together, what she needed wasn't a new zip code. It was one honest conversation with her husband that she's been avoiding for over a year. The move would have cost her a job, a support system, and her kids' school. And it still wouldn't have touched the actual problem. That's what drastic change does. It solves for the feeling of stuckness without ever touching what's actually stuck. And there's something else worth naming here. The cost of not looking at this, because if you keep reaching for the big fix instead of the honest one, it doesn't just fail once. It becomes a pattern. You quit the job and 6 months later, you're burned out again somewhere new. You end a relationship and the next one follows the same shape. You overhaul the routine and a few weeks later, you're right back where you started and just more discouraged than before. Over time, that teaches you something untrue, that you just can't stick with anything, that you're bad at follow through, that something's wrong with your discipline. But that's not what's actually happening. What's happening is you keep solving the wrong problem. Growth doesn't always require like a drastic decision. A lot of the times it comes from small pivots. Small. A pivot is simple. It's not starting over. It's adjusting direction without abandoning everything. And once you start looking for it, you'll notice this pattern everywhere. Okay. Something feels off and your mind jumps straight to the biggest possible fix. Not because the big fix is right, but because it feels faster than sitting in with what's actually going on with you. So, how do you know when a pivot is actually working instead of just another form of avoidance? I'm glad that you asked because a real pivot usually feels a little anticlimactic. It doesn't come with the adrenaline of a dramatic decision. It feels more like relief settling in slowly instead of a rush all at once. A real pivot also tends to hold, right? You're not undoing it in a week because it was never built on urgency to begin with. And so a real pivot usually still lets you keep the parts of your life that were actually working. You're not burning down the whole house just to fix one room. So if what you're considering fails those three tests, if it's dramatic, if it feels unsustainable already, if it takes out everything instead of the one thing that actually is broken, that's usually your sign it's reaction and not change. So instead of quitting the job, it may look like setting a boundary around your hours. Instead of ending the relationship, it might look like having the honest conversation you've been avoiding. Instead of overhauling your whole routine, it may look like choosing rest instead of pushing through just for today. Small shifts, but intentional ones. So let me ask you a few things. And I'd actually encourage you to sit with these instead of rushing past them. Where in your life does something feel off right now? And when you feel that, what's the first solution your mind reaches for? Is it usually the big one or the dramatic one? And as you notice that, whatever decision, whatever your mind goes to, I want you to also ask yourself, is that actually the fix to the problem? Or is it just the fastest way to feel like you're doing something about the problem? Another question I have is what would it look like to sit with that discomfort for one more week instead of solving it today? And if you take away the urgency, if nothing had to be decided right this second, what's the smallest true thing you can do about it? Instead of asking, what do I need to change completely? I want you to start asking, what's one small shift I can make within this? So I want to close the back door on something because it's not that drastic change is always wrong. Okay. Sometimes you need to do that, right? Sometimes a big shift really is what's needed. Sometimes the job really does need to end. Sometimes the relationship really is over. I'm not telling you to stay in something that's actually harming you. But most of the time, when something feels off, the fix isn't a bigger life. It's a more honest one small adjustment at a time. Because safe change is sustainable change. When you change everything at once, you create a pressure. You create pressure. And when you change one thing, you create momentum, a buildup. Okay. And that's the difference. So I want you to think about one area right now, just one. What's one pivot you can make this week? Not a big move, just a shift. Because when you start small, you give yourself a chance to actually follow through. And that's what builds real change. So this week, if it's work, maybe it's leaving on time twice this week instead of quitting. Okay. If there's your relationship, maybe that's naming one honest thing out loud instead of ending it in your head. I really hate that he snores. It drives me nuts. Have that honest conversation out loud. Okay. If it's your routine, maybe that's choosing rest one evening instead of rebuilding your whole schedule from scratch. If it's grief or loss or anything that's knocked you off center right now, maybe that's letting yourself show up different instead of not showing up at all. Small, doable, and true. So, if you've been feeling like you need to do something drastic to get your life back on track, you don't have to burn everything down to build something better. And if you take one thing from this episode, let it be that. Not because a bigger life is never the answer, but because most of the time, the life you're standing in isn't the problem. It is just asking for a little more honesty about what actually needs to shift. So this week, don't try to fix everything. Just focus on one moment where you choose to respond differently. That's where change actually starts. And if you need help slowing things down and figuring out what that looks like in real time, I have a quick reset that can guide you through that. You see it right here in the video if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, you'll find it in the description of this podcast. I want you to check it out. It's both audio and written. And so you can listen to it while driving or exercising, or you can find time to meditate and just be with yourself and read it. Both options are available, but just make sure that you click the link and follow the steps so that you can get that free guide sent to your email. Okay? So make sure to stay rooted in your truth and take care of your mind. And I'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.
Digging in deep, getting at the truth. Finding your peace at the lantern root. Growing into a brand new you with Rooted.